Hi, everyone. It's Sandy Leva, and I am super excited to have you join us today for the Insightful Accountant webinar. We're going to be talking about advanced inventory and warehouse management tactics, and you're in for a treat today. Again, I'm Sandy Leva, your MC today. I'm not going to do too much of the talking, though, because we have Brandon Phillips on the line, and I am super excited to hear what he has to say. He is an inventory management expert. He's been to hundreds of warehouses. He's an employee of Fishbowl, and he is going to be talking to us about some of the very cool things that he's learned as a Fishbowl trainer and as an experienced person with inventory management. Brandon, I'm just going to go ahead and turn the controls over to you, and so people will be able to see your screen as soon as you click all those buttons. All right. So now we see your PowerPoint, but it's not in Pres mode. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, no, actually we're seeing still, if you go up to display settings at the top and then choose, there you go. You're perfect.
All right.
You're perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for showing up today. Yeah, as she said, my name is Brandon Phillips. I've been with Fishbowl for 6.5 years now. And as a majority of that time, I was a trainer. And so my job was actually to, kind of go out and help implement the software. So because of that, I've had thousands of hours of experience in inventory management and training and accounting and all of those things that entails. I've actually been, I've done inventory management trainings for everything from a mushroom farm in Wisconsin to, satellite companies that send satellites into space for the government to, I don't know, I even went to like a hippie community once in the middle of the Ozarks. So I have a really diverse amount of companies I've been able to see, a lot of food processing, a lot of just anything type of company you could think of. So yeah, but today, so I do work for Fishbowl Inventory, and we have our products Boxstorm and Fishbowl. I'm not really going to be talking about software or anything. I'm just talking about general inventory management principles that we've learned as a company, and just over all the the 20 years of experience that we have in this kind of stuff. I am, being a trainer, I'm very used to questions. So please ask questions whenever you want, and I will try to get to all of those. And yeah, so let's get started. I have 2 slides for you guys here. This first one is about inventory management, and the second one is about warehouse management. Some of these things might seem kind of self-explanatory or like, yeah, but you'd be surprised how many companies don't have these basic things set up in this way. So, all right, here we go. All right, why do you need to control your inventory? Okay, so a lot of times we get these, especially small companies, they'll be like really kind of, they just kind of have their inventory in the warehouse. They have one guy who kind of manages it all, and he just kind of knows where things are or whatnot. And so why do we need better control than just that? Okay, well, you will pay taxes on what you have, obviously. If you do not know what you have it, you can't sell it or use it. If you do not know where it is, it will cost you time to find it. It can tie up your cash. It can tie up your warehouse space. I have a lot of stories, so bear with me. But like, for instance, one time I went to a company and they made wire, like copper wire, like telecommunications and data internet cables and stuff, and they thought they didn't really need inventory management for the longest time. Eventually they're like, okay, we need it. They found out through doing this that they had an employee who was stealing $30,000 worth of copper every other month, and they had no idea. So like, implementing controls really are beneficial. Anyway, so what does inventory management mean? If you are truly managing your inventory, you will know everything about the item. You need to know what the item is, how many you have, where it is located. We'll talk much more about locations and how you can set up warehouses in a second. How much does it actually cost you? I actually worked for a company before Fishbowl where I was in a warehouse, and we had one of our best products we sold. This is a small company. We only made like 10 million a year, but one of our products we made was one of our best product. It's made $1 million of that 10 million a year, and we thought it was like this great product, and then we didn't really know how much it was actually costing us. And when we factored in things like shipping and taxes, and we landed all those costs, and then we calculated how many times we had to do returns on that product, it turned out that product was actually costing us more than we thought it was making us. And so we actually ended up having to kill that product, and the company actually was able to take off after that. It's kind of crazy, those kind of things you can do. um, Tracking. So there's lots of different things you have to track. You have to track lot numbers, serial numbers, expiration dates, especially if you're working with any sort of food or anything. The FDA requires certain things, the government will require certain things, and you need to be able to track all that stuff. You really should know how long things have been in your warehouse, so you know how old it's getting. If it's not selling, why do you have so much of it? You know, maybe you shouldn't keep buying it. Those kind of things. Um, how fast the item turns over. So how often are you buying it? And then of course you want to be able to set up min and max levels for your on-hand quantity. And we'll talk about ABC codes for inventory in a second. There are three common types of inventory management: just in time. If you remember back to your business schools or whatever training, they always talk about Toyota was the first one to really do this. That just-in-time inventory is just getting the inventory you need at the time, so you don't have to house way more than you need. And they were able to become a lot more efficient and make more money by doing that. And of course, there's the other type is just stock. So you just have a lot in your warehouse. You buy in bulk just to get that better price, and you have the space so you can store it. And then of course, no inventory management. So yeah, I don't want to spend too much time through all this, but just-in-time inventory management is when you have a bare bone inventory or none. You purchase it just to sell or use the needed items. Works great if you have short lead times for getting your parts into inventory. So if you're buying things from China and it could take anywhere from 30 days to 60 days to get your inventory, you don't, that's maybe not the best system for you, just because it can vary so widely. But this is the most desired inventory management method, ideally, because then you don't need as much space to deal with. You're being more efficient with your items. But the items can cost more because you're purchasing in smaller quantities and less frequently, so you don't get those price breaks that we mentioned in the other one. Again, you keep your inventory on the shelf, ties up your cash with your inventory. It requires more control to know if items are moving, selling, or being used. You can usually get price breaks from your vendors if you're buying in a quantity discount. And if anyone has questions, go ahead and type them in, and we'll get to them.
Mirage has one question, Brandon. Let me read this. Why does Costco membership encourage certain bulk items versus some others? And it says, don't even take home, even though they look brand new and fresh. I guess he's just probably curious if you know kind of anything.
So Costco specifically?
About Costco, Sam's Club, their philosophies maybe.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, so their philosophy is, they get a better deal because they buy things in bulk from the manufacturers, and then they try to pass those savings on to you, but they don't pass, like, if you there's a website I found a while ago. I can't remember the name of it, but you can probably Google it. But basically it tells you what things you should buy at Costco and what things you shouldn't. So it was very interesting. Things like fresh meats and fresh produce and stuff weren't as good of a deal at Costco, but like anything frozen was way better deal at Costco. Um, and like it said, like, things like their toilet paper is like the number one thing you should buy at Costco. Like, it was a really fascinating website. But yeah, like it'll tell you, hey, these are the things they can make money on, and it's just kind of the same principle of any company. Like, fast food companies they're going to try to get you to buy as much soda as you can because that's where they make the most margin. So there's always that into it as well. So that's why sometimes they sell you certain things at bulk because their margins are good enough, and those kind of things. But that's all I really know about Costco. Their warehouses are
Okay.
are huge. I do know, as far as we get to those type of warehouses, they do like barcoding, and they have the scanners, and one of Costco things that's cost savings interesting is they don't give you bags or anything. They just have the boxes that all that stuff comes in, and you can ask for a box, and they'll just put all the stuff in it that you bought, and so you just use so they reuse that.
Cool.
Waste time and money because you don't know what you have or where it is at. Also known as I think we have that. You'd be surprised how many people have this type of inventory management, and it causes so many headaches, especially when it comes to audit time and tax time and all that. All right, inventory management differs by what you do. Manufacture, distribution, storefront sales. That's pretty obvious. Let's talk about units of measure. Do you purchase in different unit measures than you use or store them in? So unit of measures, this is where it gets really important, and this can be tricky if you're just using QuickBooks. A lot of times you'll need something else to really track unit of measures, but I have seen so many companies make so many mistakes with their unit measures. And by unit measures, I mean, like, are you tracking this item by each? Are you tracking it by pair? Are you tracking it by gallon? Are you tracking it by pound? Are you tracking it by, kilograms? Whatever it is. And then like then it gets really complicated because you might have to convert it. So say you're a coffee maker and you get your coffee beans and you're probably buying those by pounds or kilograms. And then then you have to take that process and you have to take those beans and then eventually end up making your packaged good of one each of a coffee bag or whatever. So just making sure you have those conversions are crucial, and it's really hard to convert things from gallons to eaches, for instance, but you can do it. You just got to be very careful with those type of things. So that is very important. A lot of times it just might be that you just buy things in eaches and you sell things in eaches, beating just one unit. That's pretty simple, but it can get a lot more complicated than that. Does it cost more or less depending on your measure? What other things can my affect? All right, item codes. Keep it simple. If you are making up new item codes, so I've been to many companies that they'll do, this is my part, and it is B456321. That's their internal part number name. That is confusing. You could do that if you have, hundreds of thousands of parts. You might have to do things like that, but ideally, when you make item codes, keep it as simple as possible. Make it so when you read the part name, you know what it is. Okay, it sounds really simple. And then back in the old days of the 90s and 80s, for some reason, a lot of people like to start things with double zeros. Don't start things with zeros, because in today's age, when you're using Excel and these other things, they'll often chop off those leading zeros, and it really causes lots of headaches. Just don't do it. Don't ever start a part number with a zero. Okay. And then make sure you have descriptions to say more what it is. So if you don't know that your part number is B4552, you can at least read the description and get an idea what it is. All right, ways to value your inventory. Now, most people use, because QuickBooks, most people use average costing method. There's obviously last in, first out, and their standard. Now, here at Fishbowl, our software, we handle all four of those, but by far the most common is average and FIFO. I've seen standard just once or twice, and I've seen LIFO just a couple times. But average costing, you probably all know this, but I'm just gonna go through it real quick, because just in case. If you buy something at $5 and you buy 5 things at $5, and then you buy that same thing at $10 and you buy 5 of those, then your average cost between the two is $7.50. So every time you sell it, your cost of goods sold, you'll hit $7.50. First in, first out in that same scenario. If you buy the $5 first, so you sell it, your margins will look better when you sell that first one, and then when you hit the $10 items, they'll subtract the $10 items, and you'll do that. So yeah, and then if you don't know what standard costing is, it's when you just say what the cost is, and then it hits like a deviation account. So like if you have things set up with standard costing, you say this part is $5. Now it actually might be $4.38, but you're saying it's $5, and so then it hits this deviation count. I really don't know many people who do that. And there's all the slides that just explain what I just talked about. I always get ahead of my slides. It's part of my problem. Lifetime average is the average for the entire life of your item from the first time you ever purchased it to now. Current average, weighted average. This is the most common, and it is a weighted cost of what you currently have in inventory. So most people do this. But yeah, those are the things you need to look at when you're costing your items. And again, we were talking earlier about I really like landing your costs if you can do that. So you can say, oh, I buy this $1 item from China, but when you factor in shipping, it's $4 an item. So many companies don't do that, and they don't really realize how much their inventory is costing them. So if you can land your cost at Fishbowl, you can land your cost in the software. It's really robust, and in Boxstorm as well. You can land those costs and really make that difference. Okay, so here's just some examples of the different costing methods and how they go through it. So yeah, $15, $2 in each, total cost of 30. Okay, and then your average cost here, and then your current cost of FIFO. So if you're using these different methods, this is what it's going to cost you for each of these different things. So it really does change your margins per order specifically. At the end of the day, if everything is done right, it should be the same on your ins and outs, but it will change your margin per order and what you think you're making. Any questions on that? I know I sped through that. All right. I'm going to assume no one's
We're good to go.
All right. Reorder points. Okay. Reorder points, you can get very complicated in these. I've read some textbooks about this kind of stuff, but it's basically, in Fishbowl, we actually have ways to help you automatically set your reorder points based on your usage of the part. But what is the minimum you want to have on hand at any given time, and what is the maximum you want to have on hand at any given time? And softwares like Fishbowl can help you automatically order the parts based on these reorder points and other things. So minimum quantity on hand. And then there's something called safety stock. So that's how much you want to have on hand at any given time. And you have to factor in things like lead time, like to make sure, hey, if this part takes me 30 days from order to get it into stock, then I need to make sure that I am planning 30 days out. And the safety stock is in case we have like a crazy spike in sales, you have enough to handle that kind of stuff. So here's the equation: minimum quantity on hand, lead time in days plus days worth of inventory you want on hand, average unit of sales per day, usually for a given time frame, seasons. That's another thing you can do this seasonally, because obviously if you're a retail company, you might sell a lot more during the holiday season than otherwise. So you need to factor in all those things. And a solution like Fishbowl or something like that will definitely help you do all that. And then your max quantity on hand, and you don't want too much inventory on hand. We talked about why that would be bad earlier. So, all right, minimum quantity on hand plus order interval plus unit sales per day. Fun stuff. Okay, a long time ago I mentioned we'll talk about ABC codes, and so here we are. And this part is actually kind of very important, and a lot of people don't do this. ABC, this is straight from a textbook. So ABC codes are basically what parts do most of your business. And most people have, like most companies I've ever been to, they have parts that do 80% of the business, and then they have everything else. So there's maybe just a few items that they sell like a ton of, and those are their A items, right? And if you have other items that are your B items that are just like they don't move as much, you don't selling them quite as much, but you still sell more than your C items. The reason that stuff is important is we'll talk about it later. Let me go back, click too far ahead. We'll talk about how you can use those ABC codes to better manage your warehouse and your inventory. So if you really know what parts are your most important parts, then you need to take extra care of those, essentially. All right, cycle counting. That's just basically a manual inventory count of your inventory. It needs to be done even Amazon with their fancy stuff, they do cycle counts. So like you'll have to do cycle counts every once in a while. This is especially important if you're relying on humans. And it's just, we make errors, and basically you can choose how much you want to do it. Now, most companies I've made they do it probably yearly. I've seen a lot of people do it quarterly. Some people never do it. But basically it's a way to count what your inventory is in your warehouse and match it up to what you actually have in your spreadsheets or software or whatever you're using to track it. And so definitely do that. All right. How often do your products turn over? We talked about this a little bit, but basically if you can track, hey, we buy this item and it stays in stock for 2 days and then it's sold again. So you get in stock 2 days, that's a high turnover rate for that item. You need to know from the time you bring in the quantity to the time it's gone, usually calculate in days. A lot of software have reports that can help you run these things. And why does it affect you? It's just you need to know what parts are moving the fastest. And I went too fast again. Okay, barcoding. What does it take? What does it say? Is it more accurate? Why do it? I, being working with an inventory management software, had heard every single thing you can hear about barcodes. I've been to companies who literally think the barcodes are this super magical thing that will solve all their problems and take no effort to set up. That's not the case. All a barcode is a label for a machine to tell you what that item is. Now, if you have a good software, when you scan that item, it should be able to say, all right, I scanned this barcode. I have 40 of them right here. They're in stock. They came in on this purchase order. They're needing to be shipped out on this sales order, and you should be able to track all of that. But barcodes aren't this super powerful magical thing that some companies think it is that automatically know everything about your inventory. You have to tell it what that stuff is. Good information in, good information out. Now, the nice thing about barcoding is it really does help your efficiency. If you're using some sort of scanning solution in your warehouse, you can scan the barcodes, make sure you got the right item, you're not shipping the wrong items to the wrong things, that item is on the sales order that you're trying to fulfill. And really nice if you can set up your UPCs. So those stand for Universal Product Code. And most parts you're buying, unless you're making them yourselves, and if you're making them yourselves, you're assigning your own UPCs. Those items already have a barcode on them, so you can assign them to that item in your whatever software you're using, and you can use it. So in the long run, it does save you time. It is generally way more accurate because you're making sure you're not doing the wrong thing. Those are the reasons to do barcoding. Now, I will tell you honestly, it doesn't save everyone time. If you have a one-person shop and they're in their warehouse, and this guy has worked in your warehouse for 10 years and he just knows where everything is, and at the time hound, making him stop to scan something will sometimes slow him down. Now, if you ever have a headache, or if you ever, make a mistake, or there's like, what happened to this order? Why didn't this order get fulfilled? That's where barcoding really saves you time, because you can track that kind of stuff easier and it happens less often. But it really is efficient. And as you're planning on growing a company, barcodes become more and more pivotal the larger your company gets and the more item inventory you turn over. So, any questions about barcoding?
Actually, if you guys have a question, feel free to look for the question box in your control panel window of GoToWebinar and type in any questions you might have for Brandon. Nothing so far. Great tips, Brandon. So I'm looking forward to more tips from you.
All right, we'll keep going then. Okay, part tracking. Do you track your inventory by anything special? Okay, this is about your lot expiration dates, or lot numbers, your expiration dates, your VIN numbers or serial numbers. What does it do for you? Like if you're tracking an item by serial number, so let's say you sell computers or like a cell phone. Okay, so every cell phone has a serial number. They call it like the IEMI number or whatever like that. It's uniquely identified to that item. If you're having good inventory management, you know when you ship out a certain serial number. So when that customer comes back to you and says, hey, my phone broke, you can actually see when they bought it from you. So you're like, oh, let me look at your serial number. Oh, you bought it, 3 years ago. It's out of warranty. We don't need to fix this now. You'd be surprised how many companies I've actually been to. For instance, I went to one in Richmond, Virginia, and it was a hardware company. And one of their biggest problems is they had all these people who would buy this wood from another company and then bring it back to this company and say, hey, I need to return this. This is bad. This has this issue. And it's like they didn't even buy that item from them in the first place. But because they didn't have these kind of extra tracking set up, they had no way to really verify that because they do sell that item. They just didn't buy that item from them. Does that make sense? So that is very critical on certain inventory items. Do I actually need to track by anything? Yeah, sometimes you don't. It really depends on what you're selling. Obviously, if you're working with food, you have to have expiration dates. You have to have these lot numbers. The lot number benefit is, say you make peanut butter. I went to a peanut butter manufacturing company, and they would buy these peanuts from, I think they got them from New Mexico. But anyway, they would come and they'd have these lot numbers. And one time they had like to do a recall on all the they got one bad batch of peanuts. They had to recall it all, so they had to figure out by the lot number where these peanuts went into, which peanut butter jars they ended up in, and then they had to recall all of those. So that's the benefit of those kind of things. Cause and effect analysis for tracking. So yeah, I think we just talked about that. Anytime you are tracking your inventory, it comes down to you and your employee. If you and your employees don't care, it will not succeed. Inventory control needs to be a priority of the whole company, not just one person. This is I've seen this so many times. Like inventory management needs to be, everyone needs to be on board with it. It is not easy to set up a new system to control your warehouse. But it's so necessary if you want to grow that company. And a lot of times people are just kind of stuck in their ways. We've been doing this for 20 years. Why do we have to change it now? Why are we doing this? But like without those kind of changes, your company will never be able to really fully grow. And I've seen a lot of times where new person gets hired, they're all gung ho about implementing this inventory management, but then there's all these people who are against it, and it just causes problems. So do your best to champion it and do your best to get everyone on board to make it successful, because that's the real key. So that is this slide. I have another slide that's more about warehouse management. So is there any questions about inventory management? And you can get very specific. Like if you're dealing with a customer that has certain issues, please, I'll try to answer them if I can. I have seen a lot of these things. So before we go to the next slide, any questions on just general inventory management?
Nope, we're good, Brandon. I think I love your ABC idea. I'm thinking about how to apply that to my own, but go ahead and keep going.
All right. Let me swap this again. All right. You guys are seeing it, right? Okay. All right.
Yes, sorry, I'm muting myself in between. So yeah, it looks great.
Okay, warehouse management. What, why, how, and things to think about. All right. Warehouse management. The best thing to do is to keep it simple. Keep it logical. Make sure the flow follows business processes. Think about the basics. Do you have a forklift? If you do, oh well, then you're gonna have to make sure you have enough space to turn around that forklift. What does your workers pick item? What does your no, that's bad English. What does your workers pick items or restock the shelves with? Okay. Detailed location setup. Know exactly where your inventory is located. Know exactly where to put the inventory on the shelves from receiving. Easy for new employees to find your items. Cons of doing a detailed location setup. Take times to set up and time if you want to change. If your shelves are fluid, you don't have a specific location for inventory, it can become a mess. Takes more time to receive inventory or stock your shelves. Okay, so there's two types of companies that I go out and see. There's the companies, and I would say it's almost 50-50. When I go out, a lot of times they just have one warehouse room and they just call that area stock, or they just call it warehouse, warehouse one, and they don't know what's on what shelf where, because they have these employees that they've had for several years and they just know where things are. And now generally people try to keep things in the same areas of the warehouse, but ideally this is not the way to grow a company. The really best way to set up detailed locations is to, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but aisles and rows and bins and shelves. And so so you can hand a piece of paper, a pick ticket, to any employee in that company who's never even been in the warehouse, and they'll know exactly where to go to find it. Okay? Like, just imagine if you went to a library and there was no organization system at your library. It's amazing to me how many people have that kind of warehouse setup. And if you only have one person doing everything, then I guess it makes some sense. But what happens if that person calls in sick? What happens if that person quits? It's just a giant headache. It doesn't take too much time to set up a location-based system where you can say, all right, I need to go pick up part B201, and it is on aisle A, shelf 2, bin 34. Yeah, then you can go right there. And if you have an inventory software in place, it will tell you exactly where to go. You go pick it up, and you can actually easily count what you have there. So, yeah. I'll get off my high horse for a second here. All right, if you have a generic location setup, the Pro is easy to set up and change if needed. Great if you don't have a designated location for inventory items. Takes more time to locate your items. Harder for new employees. Okay, we just talked about those. Take care of your inventory. If you have items that are heat or cold sensitive, make sure they are in a safe area. That's obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times we get into a warehouse and they have all these cardboard boxes on the corner and of the warehouse, and there was this leak through the floor, and they're just, the boxes are destroyed, and therefore everything in there. And how many, or like you will see rats will eat through boxes and things like that. So yeah, you need to make sure you're got all that figured out. Here's the Pareto principle. This is kind of where the ABCs come into play. Known as the 80-20 rule. You can Google this and read the Wikipedia about it, but 80% of your effects come from 20% of causes, or 20% of your inventory represents 80% of your product movement. So basically, what I'm trying to say is if you have a part that is your number one selling part, you should put that part closer to your packing area and your shipping area. So you don't have to walk all the way to the other end of the warehouse to pick that part and walk all the way back. There's so much things you can do if you make your warehouse efficient in that manner, where you're saying my most important items are here up front, right next to the packaging station. And then instead of, I've been to so many warehouses where like, here, we sell most of these items, and they're a 10-minute walk for these guys. You know, so that kind of stuff is just like, why would you do that when that's the thing you sell the most? It should be the thing closest to the packaging area and all of that. And that's basically what I just said here. We will have these slides for you guys at the end. You can just email me. I think Sandy will talk more about that later. But okay, I'm not gonna go through all that, but all right, things to think about. Go the golden zone for pickers, between the shoulders and knees. So, and more than just saying this is the item I sell the most, and so I'm gonna have it closest to the packaging area. It should also be between the shoulders and knees, so they don't have to get on their knees. You know, they don't have to bend all the way over to pick it up, and they don't have to get a ladder to get it. Like, just easy arm length. Put your most important items there. If your pickers are spending a lot of time on their knees or up on ladders, it's likely that later in the day their productivity will drop. What's more, picking that is less of a physical strain translates into fewer workers' comp complaints. Yeah, that kind of stuff, you can really improve your warehouse. Analyze your picking methodology to increase productivity. All right, pickers walking across the warehouse multiple times a day per order. Can we group our orders to make picking faster and more productive? So, by the way, a software like Fishbowl, they actually, when you print them a pick ticket, it will tell them to pick things in a row. So it won't say, you know, go to the north side of the warehouse, pick this item. Oh, now the next thing on the order is in the south side. It will say, it'll, you know, pick everything that's close to that area. So you're not walking all the way around the warehouse, wasting time. Equipment can help. If a man needs a piece of equipment and does not buy it, he pays for that equipment just the same as if he owned it. Let's go from Henry Ford. To save money, consider buying used equipment if the equipment offers you a significant savings, at least 25%. Typically, where you save money is in used material handling equipment is with more specialized non-standard items rather than everyday vanilla ones. Just some throwing in all these tips that we just kind of learned. shipping materials. Do you really need as much shipping materials as you do? You can decrease your shipping material costs and reduce freight expenses, limit your shipping container size to 3 or 4 if possible. An added benefit of doing this is it allows shipping personnel to pack orders more quickly and efficiently. So these are all things to think about. This place is too small to need to move. Most of the time, you can find a ton of wasted space in any warehouse. 15-foot look, get up on the forklift and see if you're wasting space. So basically like get high above your warehouse if you can and see if you're wasting any space. You'd be surprised just getting that bird's eye view what you can see. How's the spacing vertically on our shelves? Do you have the right shelves for our inventory items? Honeycombing, are we making empty locations we cannot access? The right people in the right positions are key. It doesn't make sense to put someone who can lift items in the warehouse just because you can't stand them in the office. Yeah, so make sure that you have the right people in the right positions in your company. And then you just set some SMART goals based on KPIs. The company I worked for before, Fishbowl, we actually, in the warehouse, they actually had, they would get a bonus depending on how fast it would ship orders. And when we implemented that, it really improved the efficiency of the warehouse. Just things like that. There's a lot of systems can track how long it takes to fulfill an order from the time of issuing it. So like for instance, Fishbowl can, so you give them a pick ticket, you can track, it takes them 30 minutes to fulfill this order. So you can really see who's being efficient employees and not, and you can figure out how to do those, incentive-based programs on your goals. I know that, Amazon and everywhere else has all those kind of things crazy built into their picking solutions. So I talk really fast, and so because of that, I'm done with the slides. But if there's any more questions I'd like to answer. I know you guys were hoping for a whole hour on inventory management, but instead I gave you 30 minutes.
So we have a question from Ross. What are examples of KPIs that can be tracked?
Yeah, so like how long does it take to fulfill an order? So you can track from the time that you hand them, so in Fishbowl, for instance, when you issue the sales order and you hand them the pick ticket, and you can track how long it takes them to fulfill that pick ticket. Okay, so that's a good KPI. Other good KPIs are just like how, you can look at the turnover rate of certain products. So, is this product been sitting in your warehouse for 3 months? Like you should be tracking those kind of numbers, because then you'll say, oh, that's not good that we've just been sitting on this forever, and you need to figure out a way to get rid of it. Other KPIs like anything in the warehouse, like how long your lead time. You should really know the lead time from each of your different vendors. So let's say I know a lot of companies will buy this same item, but from multiple vendors. They should track which vendor is bringing them things the fastest. And this, again, a program like Fishbowl does that all for you. So how long it takes to pick. Again, the KPI is what is your most profitable item, like what is the item you're selling the most and turning over the most? Where are those in the warehouse? I'm trying to think of some other ones. Those are kind of the key ones that jump to mind. Of course, margins on all your items, that's always a key KPI. And really getting the accurate cost of your items is crucial to helping your company grow. And you think that's just like, I'm just preaching to the choir. Everyone knows that, but you'd be incredibly surprised how many companies don't have any idea how much those items are actually costing them.
Okay, great. Couple more. We got them coming in now. So Lori says, very informative. Sarah says, can you provide suggestions on how to handle unit conversion, i.e. BOM requires going from weight to length?
Yeah, so kind of the rule of thumb, I think, with unit measures is set your default unit measure of that part to the smallest that you actually use. So let me restate that. So if you are making, you have a bill of material to make, we use coffee as an example, make coffee. Then if the smallest unit you ever use that coffee in is in pounds, then set up the default unit measure as pounds. But if you use it often in ounces and your bill of materials have all these like ounces, then set it up as the default unit measure as ounces. A lot of times people will, create their base item and they'll say, oh, we track this by pounds, but then you mostly use it in ounces. It just creates a headache. So set up the unit measures as the smallest default unit measure as possible. And honestly, that's one of the things I think QuickBooks does the worst is unit measure conversions. So if you're needing more of that, look into some other alternatives. But yeah, and then when you're like, so if you have a bill of material for things, it should take ounces, and then you take your packaging supplies, and then you make an each out of that, and so you can easily handle that in a thing like Fishbowl. Does that make sense?
Cool. All right. If you've got a secondary question, Sarah, feel free to
Yeah.
type that in too. Jenny says you do talk fast. She wants to pick your brain. Can you give us more stories about how companies found that they were losing money involving inventory management, what the problem was, and how they solved it? You had some great idea. You had some great, about the theft, the copper theft at the beginning.
Yeah. So for sure, like, again, this isn't from my experience, but in school, I remember doing like one of those business cases on the Bigfoot pizza from Pizza Hut. You guys all remember this? So my marketing professor at the time, he was actually the VP of marketing for Yum Brands for Pizza Hut. And one of the first things he did was he try to get this cost analysis all done on the different items. And the Bigfoot pizza at the time, this was in the 90s, if you remember this thing, they were trying to take on Little Caesars because Little Caesars was taking a lot of their business at the time. They would have this giant square pizza, and it made over $1 billion in the first year. And they're like, this is awesome. We have this $1 billion product, just this Bigfoot pizza. But then he's like, well, let's factor in the dough and like the way, like, so he actually went and worked at a Pizza Hut for like a month, figured out like, okay, so when we're doing this, we have to buy all these square pans, and then we use this dough, and we have this much leftover dough that is just wasted because the way we've handled our dough before is in different amounts because it's this weird square thing. And then you figured out, oh my gosh, this is cannibalizing all these other sales at Big Pizza Hut. So even though it was $1 billion item, it actually was cannibalizing their so much of their other stuff and had so much wasted material, and the pans were so much more expensive, and they could cook less pizza at a time when they were doing it because it took up so much space, and all those kind of things made it not worth it. So he killed the Bigfoot pizza because it was killing Big Pizza Hut. So it's really important, again, to know what the costs of your items, and sometimes it's really hard, especially to figure out all that cannibalization stuff, but it's really hard to know. But it's really important to try to figure out the best you can. I'm trying to think of others what inventory management stories. Yeah, just like I've seen companies who think this item is great and it ends up not being their best item because they have a high return rate or high fail rate, just that kind of stuff is all over the place. And then as much as you want to trust all your employees, sometimes you can't. And I've been to several places where they have an employee who are stealing stuff off the side, and because they had no inventory control, they didn't know that was happening. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember a couple of stories where I've worked with clients where, like, you can even apply it to a restaurant, like having a restaurant dish and you've got one ingredient that's super obscure and expensive and the price wasn't right. I think item profitability is a huge opportunity for accountants to help business owners on that. I remember when I worked at Frito-Lay, that was one of the first data analytics. They didn't call it that back then, but that I did a item profitability because you got to figure out how to allocate things. It's a really fascinating thing. Sheila's asking, can you share some control tips for receiving shipping and getting information to accounting?
Control tips. Yeah, like this is where software is crucial. And I don't know what software she's using at the time, but when you have a purchase order that's been issued to one of your vendors, you should know that that purchase order has been issued. Everyone should have access to that who needs access to it. And then when it comes in, you should be receiving off of that order. And that should automatically increase your inventory if you got a good system set up. So again, I know Fishbowl the best, but like when you issue a purchase order and then that order arrives and you try to receive it, if it's it won't let you receive it on the incorrect order. Is what I'm trying to say. So if you have a control like that, it's impossible to say, "Oh, I received this from the wrong order." Like, and it controls it for you. So just make sure that that kind of stuff is working. That you have some sort of like email notification set up that you can print out these purchase orders and you should know which day they're coming. Is that kind of what she was looking for? I kind of feel like I need some more feedback from her on that.
Yeah, Sheila, just type in the question box if you have a follow-up. Sarah typed in, she had the unit of measure question. She has a client's item that's purchased in pounds and sold in feet. So that was, and then Sheila just commented she uses QuickBooks. So
yeah,
I mean,
no.
good old-fashioned three-way matching is, so how does Fishbowl handle good old-fashioned three-way matching?
Okay, so pounds to feet. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that is difficult to do, but it is possible. And hopefully, if it's pounds to feet, they're doing some sort of manufacturing process to the item in between it. If not, then I'm really confused why they would buy it like that way. But yeah, that kind of stuff is tricky. But if you're like, I'm trying to think of a good example.
Sarah says yes, they're adding to the item and it's custom printing.
And it's custom printing it. So they have like a 3D printer or something, and they probably buy the the plastic by pound or something, and it prints out and makes a whatever thing by feet. So yeah, that kind of stuff can be tracked by your bill of materials. So the bill of materials should be doing the converting for you. So if you have a good bill of materials set up where it's like, okay, I bought I use 10 pounds of plastic and I use whatever extra chemicals or additives, and then you can even calculate things like machine time. That's something we didn't even talk about, but if you're in manufacturing space, you really should be adding some of that kind of machine time and labor costs on top of your manufactured goods, because if it takes you 10 hours to build it, it's going to cost more than the things that take you 1 hour to build it. And then when your output would be the 5 feet of plastic whatever, and that all that waste will happen there. And if you do have like leftover plastic, there's even ways in Fishbowl and stuff to like, if you have leftover pounds, you can then put that back into inventory and not just forget about it, or you can just scrap it, because if it's not usable at that point, you can scrap it. But a lot of companies don't handle that kind of scrap waste very correctly, and that's where you really like that kind of manufacturing process is it's almost impossible to do in QuickBooks, to be honest. So that's when you need some sort of manufacturing piece.
All right, that's the end of our questions. Anyone else? Okay, Jenny just typed in, can you give us an idea of the pricing for Fishbowl?
Actually, so Fishbowls, I don't know, anywhere from like, it depends. There's so many things that depends, but I'm not a salesperson, so they're probably not gonna want me to say this, but I think it starts at like 4,000 or 5,000 and goes up to like 10. I think our average sell is like $10,000. Maybe I shouldn't be saying things. I don't really know. But like, so yeah, it's really good. The thing about Fishbowl, here's my sales pitch, is it's the very best software at the price point. And I truly believe that, because people who are, they're wanting to leave Fishbowl at some point, their next solutions up are start at the six figures. So we've seen a lot of companies like, okay, well, we're growing so fast, we need something, more impressive than Fishbowl. Then they like go search for those things and they get the sticker shock, and then they usually come back. So that's what I'm in charge of the Boxstorm product at Fishbowl, and that actually is really good for unit measure conversions, and that starts at free. That's our SaaS-based solution. It's free, forever free. We actually have we're trying to give away a ton for free, but then it goes all the way up to like a $60 solution, and that includes everything that Boxstorm has to offer, all the e-commerce integrations, so the sales orders are automatically created, your purchase orders, and that's $60 per month, and you can cancel anytime, and that's really good, especially if you're using QuickBooks Online, because it integrates with that, so you don't have the double entry stuff. But that doesn't do manufacturing. So if you're wanting manufacturing, you're going to need Fishbowl. Um, but it does handle unit measure conversions. And the nice thing about that is another thing with unit measure conversions that can get really tricky. And I'm sorry, I'm talking too fast again. But so like you can convert an each to a case. So if you have an each and you buy that each in cases of 6, that's great. But in Boxstorm, like, what if you have another item, but that comes in cases of 12, and then you have another item, and that comes in cases of 13? Well, you're going to have all these different conversions playing around, and in Boxstorm, you can set up a unit measure conversion on a per item basis. So you can say this item converts to a package of 5 or a case of 6 or whatever, and it really helps you manage all that. Super, super slick. So yeah, I would really, if you're tight on budget, look at Boxstorm. If you have manufacturing, look at Fishbowl.
Okay, we did have one more question come in, if that's okay, Brandon.
Of course.
From Sheila, I love this. How do you see the future of AI impacting inventory management?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I will say that doing a lot of analysis of the industry, it's one of the slowest adopting fields. The just accounting and inventory in general, like they're a bit slower to switch to a SaaS-based solution than other industries. But I think the things with AI, and we have a lot of kind of business intelligence stuff built into Fishbowl at this point, where we do a lot of the reporting for you, whereas telling you the data of all your stuff and telling you, giving you good actionable data so you can make good decisions. That's really where AI is coming into play more than anything. It's just helping you automate things. So it is definitely affecting it. More than AI is probably the robot controlled stuff that Amazon's doing, where they have very few people working a giant warehouse. That's the stuff that's really taking over. But that stuff is so expensive that any of your clients won't be that way for years and years.
Okay. Cassie is asking, at what point would you say that an early stage business is ready to move to an inventory management system, and it's not manufacturing based on SKUs, etc.? I'm not sure. Not manufacturing based on SKUs, etc.
Yeah, good question. So, I would say with Fishbowl, we have I've seen companies that bought Fishbowl from anywhere from 2 users to hundreds of users. But I would say that the SKUs. So it really depends on how much headache they're having, right? The thing with the Boxstorm solution, especially if they're using QuickBooks Online, is it's free and it provides you all this extra stuff. So that I really don't think there's any reason not to. But generally, I would say once you're getting towards the 50, 60 SKUs, and especially if you're dealing with unit measures and you're dealing with multiple locations, that's when you really need to start looking into in an inventory management control. One thing we didn't really go into about locations is what if the place has multiple locations, like one in Miami and one in New York, then you really want a solution that can keep that inventory separate but together, so you can see how much you have all together, but you're not fulfilling an order out of New York with your Miami inventory. I've seen other systems not be able to handle that kind of stuff. Like QuickBooks doesn't really have that location group control. So if you're anything where you have multiple locations and you really want to track that, use one of these different solutions.
Great. All right, I think we're all set then. Thank you so much, Brandon. And if you want the slides, you guys can email Brandon. It's Brandon.Phillips, Phillips with 2 L's, at fishbowlinventory.com. And I did type it in the chat, so everybody does have that available to you in the chat. You can take a look at the exact spelling and cut and paste it probably. Brandon.Phillips at fishbowlinventory.com. Great job. Lots of great tips. Any last words, Brandon?
Nope. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
All right.
Almost the
All
weekend.
right. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the next webinar. Bye for now.
Bye.